Yeah, depending which region you're in, different things are covered. For example, with the OVM, we don't have termite reports because we don't have a termite problem, so we don't have to do a termite report. But if you go just across the borders into Chiron and the VN, you do have to have them. But they're becoming more and more apparent, more and more press on diagnostics. But the key ones, obviously, the asbestos report, the lead report, the electrics, and the DPE rating, the insulation efficiency of the house. They're the 4 key things that get done by the diagnostic technician, and they're covered in depth. And when you get the report, you'll have lots of pictures. If there's anything spotted that's wrong, they'll picture it all out. But the lead one is mainly in if a house hasn't had replacement windows for many years. It's normally in the window paint on the windows, because they used to use lead paint a lot. It's in the doors if the doors haven't been changed. But if a house has been double glazed and the doors have been changed, the chances of having lead paint are remarkably slim. Asbestos is mainly outbuildings. Very few houses have asbestos on the roof. Sometimes they have, but it's very rare. But I think asbestos is bad because I think people expect outbuildings to have asbestos on the roof because it's commonly done. People tend not to tile their outbuildings because they're literally what they are, they're outbuildings. So, but the DPE is and the efficiency report is probably the key one. I think they're becoming much stricter, much firmer with them. We touched on this before, and France are on a mission to get every house to a C rating, which is commendable, but if you live in an old stone house or you're buying a stone house, it's really hard to get a house to a C without insulate blocking the front, bringing all the walls in 6 inches inside and insulating, and to get a house to a C is very difficult. But they're on a mission to do it, and they offer grants to help you, but it is very difficult. But and diagnostics contain lots of words. The word danger is used a lot when it comes to electrics, but they're not really danger. When you get an electrician around, it's merely the fact that sockets come off the wall a bit or something just needs pushing back into the ceiling. But and we have to really, we advise all our clients to get them translated, because there's a lot of word in there you might not understand as a buyer if you can't speak or read French. So we always advise people to get them translated, because you need to know everything that's in those reports. But they're very thorough. They're probably 75, 80 pages in full in the whole report. And they don't cover everything structurally. They don't cover things about the roof, so you might want to do that separately about the roof. But they do give you a very good idea of what the key fabric of the house is. Electric's important, the energy efficiency rate's important. But people are more aware of them now because there's a lot of press about them. But you need to have a good look at them, come in with the agent, sit down, go through with them with the agent, and the agent point out any things that you might be worried about. Don't worry all about the terminology and some of the strong wording they use. Don't worry about that too much. The other key thing with the energy report is they give you an idea of what it costs to run the house, utilities wise. And you see these figures and it's a huge number. But what they do, if it's a 4-bedroom house, they'll assume up to 6 to 7 people could live in that house, and 6 or 7 people will have heating, 6 or 7 people will have a shower. There might only be 2 people living in it, but you used to be able to give the utility bills as evidence and say, look, that's not the cost, here's the cost, and they would take that and put it in. But now it's religious, they assume maximum occupancy, and they quote utility running costs at what the amount of people that live in could live in the house. And obviously rarely is a house full of people. So people get those, and it could say it's going to cost you $7,000 a year for electric, or for gas or whatever, and it's extortionate amount of numbers they quote. But we would always ask the sellers or the agent, have you got the actual bills, have you got the accounts? And the sellers will have them. We always have them at the house when we do a viewing, so we can say to people, I know you've had that in the report, but here's the actual report. So make sure your agent shows you the actual utility bills, because they are based on full occupancy, which is rare, and it's just not correct. So you just need to bear that in mind. Yeah, when the DP is done, it would be graded anything from A to G. A is fantastic, G is obviously not so efficient and not so good. But the law's changed now. Anything within E, F or G, if your house comes out as that as a seller, you have to provide what's called an audit energetic report, which is a very lengthy report. It costs about €400, so it's another big expense. But basically you are providing a report for the buyer, which breaks down what they have to do to get the house from a G to an F to an E to a D, and so on, and the cost involved. And these reports can look quite alarming, because the cost they quote to get them to each level is extortionately high. But they don't account for the fact that you might know someone local that can do the work. You might be able to do the work yourself, the insulation work, the windows. You might be able to do all these things yourself. But don't be alarmed by their report. There's no obligation to get the work done on anybody's part. But the seller now has to provide a report telling you how much it would cost. and what you need to do to improve it at each new level. And of course with rental agreements now, F&Gs can't be let out full time on like more than 3-month contracts, more than holiday let type contracts, and E comes into play in 2027. So from 2027 you can't long-term let any rated property. You can let them over summer, May to September, like a gîte, because insulation and heating is not important during that time, so they don't worry about it. But yeah, so if you're looking to buy something to rent out, you need to take that into account as well. But yeah, it's a big expense for the seller, not for the buyer. But as a buyer, when you get these reports, don't be alarmed by them and the figures they quote to improve things. They're very high quotes, but generally they're not that high, and there's no obligation. If you choose to make it better and insulate it better, that's your choice. But there's no legal obligation for you to do so. Yeah, wind farms in the OVN area, they're very popular. Not in every commune and not in every region of France, but it's one of those Marmite things. I think some people have got no problem with them when buying a house. Some people have a big issue with them. They're also very prominent. You can't avoid them, you can't miss them. I think it depends on your state of mind. You can't have them. I think it's within sort of 500. Can't be within 500 meters, I think, of a house, which sounds a long way, but it's it's not that long. They were trying to get that to 800, but whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. But they're going. They're not going to change. More will probably go up because France really like them, wind farms and what they provide. But whether they could put them more raw, they probably could. But if you're selling the house and you've got a wind farm close by, it's not necessarily going to affect the value so much, but it's the saleability, because you're probably going to rule out 30 to 40% buyers straight away because they won't want to live near a big wind turbine, whereas the other 60% might not be bothered. So I'll be totally honest and say it is slightly harder to sell houses right near wind farms, because you will automatically write off a certain amount of buyers that simply won't view it because of that. Solar farms becoming again really more apparent. Difference with solar farms is they're not as obstructive, they're not as big and large, they're quite flat in the fields, although now they're tending to do them 2 to 3 metres high. So the farmers can still use the land underneath and cows can still go under them. So they are changing, they are becoming taller, but they're not classed as a nuisance by the authorities in France. Like a notaire, when you go to a notaire's appointment, they'll really talk about wind farms. They'll put the map up on the screen, show you where they are, where the new ones are coming, where they've been declined, but they don't do anything at all with solar farms. There's no mention of solar farms, but they are cropping up more and more. There's kind of no legal obligation to tell people about them, but there's a moral one, and morally as an agent, if you know there's one coming, you should make sure your buyers are aware of it and let them make a decision based on the facts. But they're not an eyesore. Yes, it'd be better to be a field, but they're not an eyesore like some wind farms can be classed as. But they are cropping up more and more. And again, some people are bothered, some people aren't, but they're not as bothered about them as they are with wind farms. Yeah, obviously wind farms, you know where they are, and as agents we all have access to know them where they are. The notaire, when you have the appointment at the notaires, they're very, we have to oblige to tell people anyway if we know there's a wind farm up, but notaires are very strict on it. They will make sure when you have the compromis signing, which is why it's always good to come and do the compromis signing rather than do it by proxy and not come to the appointment. If you do it by proxy, you'll still have the map in the pack as to you'll get to sign, but you won't necessarily know what all those means, all the different colours on the map. But the notaire will be very strict, put it up on the TV, and we'll tell you where they are, the distance of where they are, and we'll report on them for you, so you won't sign that compromise if you're suddenly worried about it. But to be fair, you should know long before where the wind farms are. Your agent should be waiting until you get in front of the notaire. You should be telling them long before where they are. But yeah, notaires are very prominent on them. They're not prominent on solar farms, they don't talk about them, they don't bring them up, they're not part of any reports that we do. They're very different in what they can cause problems for a house sale. But yeah, notaires are hot on both. Not so much hot on the solar panel farms, because then, as I say, they're not a nuisance. But wind farms, they're very hot on them, and they will bring them up at every appointment. Even when you go and sign again, they'll probably bring them up again to make sure you're aware of them. So they're very prominently talked about, and you should never not know about them. Yeah, septic tanks, my experience in the last 5 years of doing this job in France, 90% of the septic tanks in rural France don't conform. It's almost a given. You go to a house, you expect it not to conform. And even if it's been fitted in the last 5 years, regulation changes, and now it might not conform. It might not cost a lot to put it right, but it might not conform. And one of the biggest changes with septic tanks is in the last sort of 18 months or so, Notaires, when they sell a house with a non-conforming tank, they're legally obliged to tell the local authority, be it the Limousin Council or the Sidapa Bank, they're now legally obliged to tell the local water authority for that area that they've sold a house with a non-conforming FOS and give them the address. That never used to happen. So that you've got more chance of getting inspected now, because you get a year. When you sign your compromis or you complete on your property, it's in the contract. You've got 1 year to replace it or get it conforming. And that's in the contract, so legally that is the state of play. Lots of people will do it, maybe not a year, maybe 2 or 3 years, and if they come around, they'll give you some kind of fine. But the fact they're now being told where they're non-conforming, if they've got the manpower, you're more likely to get a visit. And I know I've had lots of people I know have recently had a letter saying they're coming to inspect. They won't just turn up, they will give you notice, but they'll come and inspect. If they come and inspect and nothing's changed, they will probably give you another year and give you a fine, anything from €70 to €200, depending where you are. But I think those fines are going to go up at some point. But they're certainly getting more switched on to the fact of the houses that don't have them, because the notaire will now legally obliged to tell them that they've sold a house with a non-conforming FOS. So you've got more chance of getting inspected than you did before. No, it's one thing I've always found weird in France is that people buy houses with no surveys. And I think in 5 years and probably well over 200 sales, I think 2 people have had a survey done. It's quite remarkable because you'd never do that in the UK. But it's just not a done thing here. There's very few surveyors about. You get the geomets that come out, but they're not surveyors, they're more land surveyors. There's some English surveyors that were RICS registered that work out here, but they're dealing with, those people are great, but they're dealing with properties that they've probably not had to deal with before, 500-year stone properties. And people have this view that, you know, it's been there 200 years, if it was going to fall down, it would have fallen down by now. It's very, very weird. But even banks, when they do mortgages, they don't do surveys. They don't send a surveyor out. They'll literally lend you the money on a house with no survey, which you think is very strange. But then I don't hear about anybody having structural issues with the house or houses falling down or major problems. But yeah, surveys are very something that doesn't happen here. I think roof reports, and I always recommend people get someone to have a look at a roof, because roof is probably one of the most expensive things you ever have done on a house. And you know, that's not part of the diagnostic pack. And nothing structural is done via the diagnostic pack. So it would be hard to get a structural survey done. You could get a very good qualified builder to have a look around and give you a bit of a view that, yeah, everything's fine. But the roof is quite a critical thing, so it's always worth getting someone to check the roof before you sign your compromis, just to confirm that it's okay. Or if it's not, what's got to be done to it, and get a DEVI, an estimate as to what it's going to cost to do it, so you know that before you fully commit. Yeah, you have 2 appointments with the notaire, the compromis signing and the completion. Compromis signing is the long one, because that's when you will go in and the notaire, it probably about an hour and a quarter, but they'll go through every single report that's been done on the property. So you might have had them to read, and we say get them translated so you know about them, but the notaire will go through them. Most of them have the big TV screens, they'll put them up on the TV screen, and they'll take you through them. They won't go through them every bit, but they'll go through any problems in them. If there's anything come up in electrics, they'll talk about it. Anything's come up with lead or asbestos, they'll talk about it. But normally we're aware of those things as an agent, and they've sorted those things out beforehand, and the buyer's aware. But they won't miss anything, they're very thorough. It's about an hour and a quarter. The buyer and seller are normally there. A lot of sellers, if it's a holiday home and they're not here, they may sign the compromis by proxy. So they would have already signed a power of attorney for the notaire to sign on their behalf. So the buyer might be there on their own, but it's irrelevant who's there. The notaire will go through everything. And it's a very comprehensive, full-on appointment, and they'll talk about the FOS, the report on the FOS, they'll talk about wind turbines, as we've discussed. Every aspect of the house, and you know, the notaires are, bear in mind, they're active for both parties. You know, in the UK, you have a solicitor for the buyer, a solicitor for the seller. Here, they work on behalf of the government, and they're working for both parties, so it's their job to make sure both parties are duly informed of anything that's going on with the house. But yeah, they're very thorough, it's about an hour and a quarter, whereas the completion appointment is much quicker. It's probably more like 40 minutes, because they won't go through all the reports. They might touch on the wind farm thing again, but they won't go through every report. They'll say to the buyer, are you happy? Do you want us to go through them again? If you don't, they won't, and that's a much quicker appointment. And they'll talk about anything else they've had back since compromis signing, because once you sign compromis, SAFER gets involved. If it's in the SAFER area, which is French Agricultural Farming Authority, they've got a right to buy houses if they're in farmland area. They rarely do, 99% of the time they won't. But you can't request that report until you sign compromis. And that can take 8 weeks. A buyer can expedite that report by paying a fee. 250 to 400 euros, and they can get that back in 8 weeks if they want to complete quicker. And that report comes back, and they will talk about that at the Compromis. They've got that back now, they don't want to buy it, and they do what's called a certificate of urbanisation, which is basically a report through the mairie about the commune, what's going on around the house, any commercial activity around the house, a bit like a local search in the UK when you buy a house. So it's a certificate of urbanisation, and it just says everything that's going on, and that takes 4 to 5 weeks to get. So these are the things that are done between Compromis and completion. So anything they've not gone through review at Compromis, they'll go through with you at the completion, again in a very thorough, proper way. Yeah, hopefully most things are sorted before you get to the Compromis, but things can come up that a buyer wasn't aware of. They weren't told by the agent, and that shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does. Or the seller didn't tell something to the agent, so the buyer wasn't, the agent wasn't aware of it. But then it's a case you've got everyone in the same room normally, so it's a case of literally just talking it through. This has come to light. It might involve talking about price reduction in that room with the sellers and buyers there. It might result in a clause going in the Compromis. For example, if we went to the Compromis and we realised that the seller suddenly declared they never got planning on something they should have got planning on, a clause can go in the Compromis to say that we'll sign Compromis today, we complete at maximum of 3 months, but before we complete, we must have the retrospective planning in. If that planning doesn't come in before completion, the buyer would have the right to withdraw and not purchase that property because that clause hasn't been met. So that's a clause for the seller to get planning. Planning happens a lot. But yeah, it's just a case of negotiation. It doesn't happen too often. By the time we get to the notaires, I had a completion last week where we got to final completion, we realised that the seller removed the wood burner, and it was part of the sale, it was on the details, it was there when they viewed it. So we had quite a fraught hour with the client wasn't there, they were in South Africa and the seller, so we had to phone them, and we had quite a fraught time, and eventually we got a price reduction to cover that. So between the agent, the notaire and the clients, we'll sort any problem out. I've never had one in 5 years where it's not been sorted out. Sometimes it might delay the Compromis a couple of days while we do something. Or then the Compromis can also state that if something's not right at the house, the notaire can say, when we complete, I'm going to hold back 3,000 euros until that work's finished. And they'll have a devy before completion, and they'll pay the artisan direct after completion when that work done. And the seller will agree to that you hold back 3,000, the devy's 2,900, the buyer will get the work done when they move in, and the notaire will pay the artisan direct at those funds kept. But everything's sortable, everything we've negotiated, and it doesn't happen that often, but it's easily solvable when it does. After you sign Compromis, as you know, buyer gets a 10-day calling off period. At the end of that 10 days, they pay a deposit, and most people in the UK do that via a currency company because it's easier. So they'll send it through a currency company at 10%. About a week, 10 days before completion, they'll get a completion statement from the notaire which explains what they've got to send over, and that will include full funds for the purchase, the agent's fees, because most buyers pay agent's fees, the notaire fees and the taxes. And then notaire's fees and taxes are about anything up to 10% on top of the purchase price. And if the tax foncier, if the property is completed after January the 1st, the current sellers still have to pay the tax foncier for that year when it comes out in September, but the notaire will ask the buyer, as part of the funds they're providing, to include the fees pro rata for the rest of that year for the tax foncier. But it's all broken down on a completion statement. But the notaire will want the funds a week before completion to make sure it's all in place, and they'll confirm they've got it. And on the day of completion, they'll also issue a full printed receipt for every fund you've given them, stamped and signed, so you know they've had those. But yeah, about a week before, a full completion statement, and you'll just send the funds across however you choose to do that. Yeah, sending money over, I think there was a time when I first bought my first house in France, most of my funds certainly the deposit went to the agent, but that would never happen now. We're a non-money holding business, Beaux Villages, so we don't hold any funds, and I think it's much safer that way. But I don't know of any agent that takes funds or takes deposits. I think it used to happen, but now everything goes to the notaire, and I personally would never send funds to an agent. They're probably not insured to cover the amount of funds that you might send over. For me, 100% money goes to the notaire, does not go to anybody else. Yeah, one thing I didn't say when you do Compromis is that buyers, before you sign Compromis, you'll go back to the house and have a look. You must go back before you sign Compromis and just check you're happy, make sure you're happy with the property, and the same before you complete. But the day of completion, you will literally, once the notaire's finished their job, the agent will hand you the keys. Your agent will help you transfer utilities over. You have to have this house insured from the day you purchase it, from the day you complete. Likewise, the seller has to have insured to the day as well. So you'll get it insured, you'll have that arranged beforehand. Yeah, it's quite a simple process after that. You get your keys. If you're going there, you'll go there straight away. Utilities will be transferred. We will read the meters at the house on the morning of completion, and you'll get a copy of that, as will the seller. And then we'll work with you to change it over to your name, get everything transferred over, the water, the electric, if there's a gas account with a tank or anything like that, we'll do that. We'll kind of help you get internet sorted out, and sometimes you can just take it over. But yeah, our job doesn't stop when we complete, for the next week after that. There's lots of questions that come up, how do I do this, how do I do that, and we're very happy to help with that. But the 24 hours after completion is really, for most people, it's a feel-good factor. You've got the keys, your dream's been realised, and you're in a real happy mode because you're now in your French house, and it's something a lot of people dream about for years. We get lots of tears on completion, lots of tears from buyers that they finally got their house, their dreams being realised, and it's a really, really nice, satisfying thing that they got that house and you played a part in that journey. But from the minute of completion to the next 24 hours should be unless there's nothing wrong with the house, it should be a really joyous, happy time, and it's fairly simple. The agent will finalise everything else for you afterwards to make sure you move in happy and smooth.